Hi, everybody. Douglas V. Gibbs here, Mr. Constitution. Let's talk about today is July 4th, 2021, when this is being recorded, Independence Day. And the Declaration of Independence is the document that was adopted that day by the Continental Congress. It was then sent out to the states for ratification. It is the second of four founding documents, the first being the Articles of Association in 1774, in which the colonies all banded together to in an agreement to boycott British products. Then you got the Declaration of Independence in 1776, the Articles of Confederation, which were adopted by the Continental Congress in 1777 and then ratified by the states in 1781, and then the Constitution of the United States of America, written and adopted in 1787, and by 1788, it was ratified by the states. All right, so here's the thing about the Declaration. The draft that we know, the draft that we read, was not the original draft. The final draft was missing a significant portion, and it was 138 words of scathing rebuke against slavery, written by Thomas Jefferson. Here's the language that was removed. Anti-slavery language that was removed before the document was adopted. This was removed on July 1st, 1776. The first word being he is reference to the king. He has waged cruel war against human nature itself, violating its most sacred rights of life and liberty in the persons of a distant people who never offended him, captivating and carrying them into slavery in another hemisphere, or to incur miserable death in their transportation thither. This piratical warfare, the opprobrium of infidel powers, is the warfare of the Christian king of Great Britain, determined to keep open a market where men should be bought and sold. He has prostituted his negative for suppressing every legislative attempt to prohibit or to restrain this execrable commerce, execrable commerce, and that this assemblage of horrors might want no fact of distinguished die. He is now exciting those very people in rise in arms against us, and to purchase that liberty in which he has deprived them, and murdering the people upon whom he also obtruded them, thus paying off former crimes committed against the liberties of one people, with crimes which he urges them to commit against the lives of another. So this is the scathing rebuke by Thomas Jefferson. Remember, Thomas Jefferson, as we are told, was a slave owner, and so makes him racist. He actually inherited his slaves. He abhorred slavery. He wanted it abolished. He couldn't afford to free his slaves due to the way the laws were written in Virginia. Virginia, at one point, as a colony, had tried to eliminate slavery, but the king had disallowed it. Thomas Jefferson was so popular among his slaves that they appreciated him. He treated them like family. That one time on a trip that he came back from France on, they threw him on their shoulders and carried him up the hill to the house. The DNA testing has shown that he did not father a child with his slave girl Sally. That was actually his brother Randolph Jefferson that did that. Now, that does not mean that Jefferson never bought slaves. He did buy slaves on occasion. But there is a story of one time that he bought slaves because he wanted to keep the family together. The parents were going to be separated from each other as a couple and separated from their children because different slave owners wanted different parts of the family. So he purchased the whole family to keep them together. So the original draft of the Declaration of Independence had all this anti-slavery language in it. Why didn't it keep it? July 1st, 1776, they removed the language because two states of the 13 said they would not sign the declaration if the language remained. South Carolina and Georgia. And then someone says, well, Doug, why would two states dictate? Why would the rest of the states let them dictate? Because Florida, which was the Spanish Empire to the south, was hoping to catch those colonies separated from the Union, invade them, and take them over themselves. It needed to be a unanimous union for the safety of the entire Union. And the only way to make sure that those two states signed on was to remove that language. But now understand something. We're told it was such a racist country. Then how is it that 11 of the 13 states accepted and wanted that anti-slavery language in the original draft of the Declaration of Independence? Understand that most of the founders were abolitionists. Most of them hated slavery. Most of them wanted it abolished. George Mason refused to sign the the U.S. Constitution, partly because it didn't have a Bill of Rights, partly because it did not abolish slavery. They believe that slavery should be a state issue once the slaves were in the states, but the federal government should be able to handle the external issues that were associated with slavery. Therefore, in Article 1, Section 9 of the United States Constitution, it gave Congress, as of 1808, the authority to abolish the Atlantic slave trade, which it did. They passed the bill in March of 1807 and made it effective January 1st, 1808. And then there's Frederick Douglass, the escaped slave, who taught himself how to read, and at one point said he hated the Constitution until he read it. And later on, he had a quote that's very fascinating that nobody hears about. And the quote says this: I have studied the Constitution, and in my studies, I have found it not to be a pro-slavery document. So the battle over slavery was a big issue with the founders. Most of them wanted it abolished, but they wanted to make sure they did it in a proper manner. They first of all believed that if you were to rapidly emancipate these slaves, because they had not been exposed to freedom, they had not been raised in freedom, all they knew was servitude, that it would be cruel. Or as a few of them said, their minds were like children, not because of who they were, not because they were black, not because they were of African heritage, but simply because they had not experienced anything beyond being owned and under servitude. And so they wanted to be a gradual emancipation. And most of the laws coming out of the northern states following the Constitutional Convention were exactly that: gradual emancipation. Now, understand, at the time of the U.S. Constitution, all the states were still slave states, but the ones in the North had very few slaves, and they were slowly abolishing slavery through different laws. The first ones appearing in Pennsylvania. In fact, Benjamin Franklin, the elder statesman in the Constitutional Convention, was the president and founder of the first anti-slave pro-abolition organization in the country. It was the Society of Friends in Pennsylvania. So there you go. So the original language in the original draft of the Declaration of Independence was anti-slave, was removed in order to make sure two states, South Carolina and Georgia, would sign the Declaration. And the question is, had they have kept that anti-slavery language, what would have happened? Well, South Carolina and Georgia would have refused. They would have been on their own. They would have been a part of Spain, and that would have then made the rest of the colonies or states vulnerable. And they may not have been able to pull off the war. I don't know. So the war for independence was unfortunately dependent upon those two states being a part of the effort. And those two states would not be a part of the effort unless that language was removed. It's a tough situation for the 11 states who agreed on keeping that language. But once again, when you're told by the critical race theory people out there and all that America had a racist founding and that they were all just a bunch of racists, remember, 11 of the 13 states wanted that anti-slavery language to remain in the Declaration of Independence. All right, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on Daily Dose. United we stand, combined we kick butt. God bless America, my friends. God bless you. Have a happy, happy Independence Day. And remember, it's not about barbecues and fireworks. It's about the fact that this country declared independence against a colonial power, the ultimate anti-colonialist move to become a new country based in liberty, based in the idea that we all have natural rights. Thanks for watching.